All right, thanks, Bucky. I'm just trying to get my screen to share here. Of course, it worked in the test, but it's not working now.
We're seeing your screen.
Now you see it. Okay. All right. So I want to first off just say I appreciate the fact that this presentation was made by Jeff Hendricks. Jeff is, I think, online as well to help out in case I make any big mistakes. But Jeff is a professional firefighter and paramedic, and he made this presentation, and I offered to do it in English. So thank you, Jeff. Just a quick background on myself. Casey Pruett, I'm from the US, but I live in Germany. I work at the European Space Agency doing space medicine for astronauts. I've been skydiving since 2011. I have about 1,200 skydives now, and I've had 3 cutaways. All right, so the idea here is to talk about the things that are most important to help someone that's had an accident. And if you're the first person there, or you are among the first people to arrive at an accident, obviously this is a horrible situation, and I hope none of you ever have to face this. But there are definitely some things that you can do even if you're not a trained paramedic or physician, that you can really help to increase the chances of someone surviving and being well taken care of. And so the idea here, the main red thread, so to speak, that I'm going to go through all the points on this in more detail, but this is kind of your pre-test. The main points, of course, are that you're going to get professional help, and in Belgium, that's by dialing 112. You should only move the person unless there's an immediate danger. So for example, the person may have landed in the middle of the road and there's a truck. You obviously are not going to help that person by phoning for an ambulance if there's a truck that's almost going to hit that person. Oxygen is extremely important and is going to be very helpful. You saw in Ali's presentation earlier that breathing is a very important part of calming fear and keeping yourself regulated. So oxygen, getting someone oxygen, helping them to breathe is really important. CPR is obviously an important element. We're not going to teach CPR in this, but that's something to always consider. The recovery position is absolutely a very important thing that will help you not only in a skydiving accident, but in many different situations. Can benefit from putting someone in the recovery position. And the other important part to remember is that you should never, ever leave a victim alone. That's a really important part to manage the fear that they're going through and anxiety, obviously. So first off, if we talk about an accident, we're going to break this down into where that accident happens. Is it either going to be on the DZ itself, or is it going to be an off landing somewhere outside of the DZ? The procedures are very similar for both, but we'll try and emphasize again, calling professional help is really one of the most key things that you can do. And that's really a point to drive home, that you should always take a cell phone with you if you can on every jump. It's a really important thing to have. There's also multiple ways that you can access someone else's cell phone if you don't have one. For example, if the victim has a cell phone, there are different ways you can access the emergency call function on the cell phone, and that's important to do as well. And then you're going to be able to try and help that person by giving the different type of help. And again, you should really only move the victim unless there's this immediate danger. Obviously, you don't want to make a problem worse by moving someone, but if there's an immediate threat to that person's safety or continued existence, you clearly want to get that person out of any immediate danger. So one of the most serious situations that you can come across is if a person is unconscious, and that's really not a good situation. Again, the very first thing you should do is dial 112 and get the emergency services aware of the situation, and they should send a Moog ambulance, which I've learned through Jeff. The Moog designation means that there is a trained paramedic and a trained physician with at least 13 years of specialty training on that ambulance. So this is the most sophisticated ambulance service that you can get in Belgium. It's extremely important that you tell the emergency services that the person is unconscious, and that will automatically indicate that they need to send this Moog ambulance, which is a really important thing to get the best possible care. Having that in your mind, you should definitely, if you care anything at all about this person that's just had an accident, telling them, the emergency services, that the person is unconscious will be really helpful to get that Moog ambulance and to ensure that best possible service. You can also coordinate with other ground control AFF instructors or people that are familiar with emergency procedures to try and help get that person stabilized. You can spread the canopy around to give that person some privacy and or get them into the shade to prevent some overheating. And if anyone is trained in professional emergency response procedures, then you can help support that. If, however, you need to be that person, one of the very first things you can do is to help hold that person's head stable. This is really important because you want to make sure that that person is not moving. If they're unconscious, you're going to try and unfasten the helmet if you can. This is obviously difficult with some of the newer G3 or G4 helmets, but you do want to try and get that person as best an opportunity as possible to get oxygen to that person. Having that person breathing, even if they're unconscious, is going to be very important. So if you can, then you want to try and remove the helmet while keeping that head stable and the neck. It's really important that you will not be able to necessarily determine if there's a neck or spine injury. So you want to assume that there is, and that means that you want to try and do as little movement as possible of the person, unless again, it's absolutely, they're in danger. But removing the helmet or opening the visor is going to really help allow that person to get more oxygen. And oxygen is a really key component to helping that person get through this situation. So another way to help that person get more oxygen is to unfasten the chest strap and unzip the jumpsuit. This again will help relieve some of the pressure and enable that person to a better opportunity to breathe. Now, we're not going to go through the procedure to remove a rig via a block roll maneuver, but this is something that I highly recommend you grab someone and help them learn how to do this in a weather hold, for example, or you practice this with someone who knows how to do this. But this is good. This will be helpful to also get the rig off of the person if they're not seriously injured, because when the emergency services come, they will be cutting that rig off. And obviously that's a small price to pay to get the emergency medical attention that you need. But if it's possible, you can get that rig off the person with the rig roll. And then that will also help facilitate getting the person into recovery position, which I'll demonstrate with a couple pictures here in just a second. But the recovery position is designed to help that person get into a restful body position that also facilitates keeping the tongue from rolling back into the throat and blocking the airway, which could cause that person to have more problems, obviously. So then at this point, you would then be able to check head to toe on the person for any signs of injury. If you see any clearly broken bones, any cuts, scratches, bruising, etc., that you would be able to try and help communicate that to the emergency services when they arrive. So again, a really key thing here, these first points, is to help get that person oxygen. And oxygen is going to be that victim's best friend at this point, because it's really going to help with pain management. It's going to make sure that they're staying alive. Especially if they're unconscious, you want to make sure that they're breathing. Because if with these other facets, you can also help facilitate that person get more oxygen and be in a better position, especially for when the emergency services arrive. Because this recovery position is really key. It's also, we'll demonstrate with the next couple pictures why that's an also important position for you to know about if you have any type of accident or you come across someone that's had an accident or collapse, for example. It's a very good mechanism for helping that person. And obviously, if the person is not breathing, then CPR should be started immediately. If you're not trained in CPR, we don't recommend that you do that at all. But I think it's a good idea to get CPR training if you've never had it, so you can understand the right way to do that. Because if someone's not breathing, they're definitely going to die very soon, regardless of whatever accident, neck or spine injury they might have. So you're trying to get that person oxygen so you give that person every chance to survive and let the emergency services take care of the next steps. So this recovery position, it's really important to understand that this gives the victim the best possible way to get through this situation. You're trying to lay them on their side. This also prevents any type of injuries being made worse. and you're going to tilt the head a little bit into what's called a sniffing position. So you're going to tilt the chin a little bit forward, again, very gently, so that you give that person every opportunity to prevent the tongue from rolling into the back of the throat and covering the airway. Putting the arms in this position and the legs crossing, again, just helps keep that person stable on their side. This is another way you can do that if the person is a little bit larger, you're not able to get them fully onto their side. But keeping the chin pointed up a little bit is going to be important to remember. You don't want to crank the neck, you don't want to twist it much at all, but if you can try and position the person as if they're sniffing a flower or something like that, then you're going to get that head into the right angle to prevent the throat from blocking. So if you are still on the drop zone and the person is conscious, this is a little bit better scenario because there's not as much immediate need. But again, the main point here is dial 112 and wait for the emergency services. You're going to, again, kind of help hold that head stable, the helmet stable, the whole neck and head area. You're going to open the helmet if possible and remove it. Again, that helps to facilitate getting that person more oxygen. Even though they're conscious, they could be going through other shock situation. And so helping them by unfastening the chest strap and unzipping the jumpsuit will again facilitate that person being able to breathe a bit easier. If they're conscious and they are in agreement that they're not in any other serious pain, you can try and remove the rig as well. You can start to check the person from head to toe for other injuries. And especially you want to note if the person is agitated or is speaking a little bit gibberish, they're not making any sense, or other signs of shock, like they might feel cold or clammy, they might be sweating a lot, they could have difficulty breathing even though they're conscious. And these things are important that you want to communicate to the emergency services when they arrive. But you want to do all of this in cooperation with and after you've received approval from the victim. If the person says, "I'm hurt, don't move me," then absolutely don't do that. But you do want to try and help them breathe so that they can get more oxygen, because that's a really important component. But please don't move anybody if they say, "I'm hurt," or "it's injured," or "this part of my body hurts." Please don't touch it. Then absolutely abide by those wishes. Now, when you land, if you're on an outside the drop zone, this is a little bit trickier situation, of course, but it's really important that you stay together and you don't want to leave the victim alone ever. It's really important if you see someone in free fall that you see has a problem, or they've, perhaps you've seen an AAD save happen, someone's unconscious under canopy, you want to try and follow that person and land near them as if possible to try and help them. You want to keep looking around throughout the jump. Remember, it's been stated before, the jump's not over until you're back in the hangar. So keep yourself safe as well. That means by 2,000 feet, you need to have chosen where you will land and make sure that you do that with the landing priorities. So because you can't help someone else if you're also injured. So just a good reminder quickly of some of the landing priorities. You make sure you land with a canopy that's level and overhead. You want to land in an area that's clear of obstacles. You want to flare symmetrically to at least 3/4 brakes, and if possible, land into the wind. And these are things that are going to help make sure that you're able to provide that help when you land and try and help take care of that person. Because obviously you want to make sure no one else is injured also. If there is a collision in free fall and you see someone drop down and have a reserve, or they're in pain, or they can't flare their canopy with one arm or both arms, you want to do the best that you can to try and keep all those people in sight and make sure that no one else is injured. If you land outside the drop zone, one of the key things is that you want to make sure that you can be found. They need to be able to see you. If the plane does a flyover to help locate you, if you are using the 112 app in Belgium, that will automatically share your GPS location with the emergency services. Of course, the Burble app is an option as well. You want to make sure that that 112 number is clear in your mind. That's what you want to call when you're in Belgium for any emergency. You can also try and use other mechanisms or Messenger in Facebook or WhatsApp if you can to let people know where you are and what the situation is, and if you need an ambulance or you need help. And obviously you want to make yourself visible. We all typically have very bright canopies and or jumpsuits, and those are great things if you spread them out or make them visible in a in some way to be seen. And obviously one thing that may not immediately be obvious, but we all have hopefully a big bright orange reserve in our canopy, in the reserve slot. And that's something that you can pull out as well and spread that out if you're in a difficult position to locate. So think about ways that you can try and make sure that you're seen and that you do everything you possibly can to help make sure that people find you. And again, that 112 phone number is going to be your best friend in all of these situations. Obviously, if you're outside the drop zone and it's just you and the victim, then that's going to be a situation it should be hammering into your head by now. You want to dial 112 and give them all the details that you can, where you are and the situation that the person's in. You want to, again, try and remove the helmet if possible, unfasten the chest strap and the jumpsuit, and get that person into recovery position. All of these things should be hopefully becoming very redundant as I keep hammering these home on you. If there's 2 or more people, you can you want to make sure that you dial 112 and get that phone number started so you can have the emergency services start to look for you and get help on the way. And you should definitely follow the same steps as we've talked about already. If you have an additional person, you can also have one person go and try and get help by going to the nearest road, flagging down a motorist or a person, or get a phone, or go to a house or someplace that's got another number that they can help get location more easily coordinated to find you. But you still want to help that person get into the recovery position and get oxygen. That's really important, because you never ever want to leave the victim alone in these situations. It's a really, it's a distressing situation, obviously, for the person, whether they're unconscious or not, but you want to make sure that you comfort that person, help them breathe, and keep them aware of the fact that help is on the way and that you're doing everything you can to get that person back to a hospital or a location that can give them medical attention that they need. So again, we're going back to the red thread. Very important, as I think I've emphasized repeatedly almost every slide, is getting professional help is the key. That's the first thing that you should do. And you do that by dialing 112 in Belgium. And you should only move that person unless they're in immediate danger. If there's some reason that you think that person should be moved, you really need to question that. And you want to make sure that you keep that person stable, only move them if there's an immediate need. Getting oxygen to the person is extremely important. If the person's not breathing, they are going to die. And that's something that you need to consider, even if you're worried about a neck or spine injury. But if the person is not breathing, they're going to die. So you need to help that person get oxygen. And doing that with CPR is necessary. If the person is not breathing, they're unconscious, you need to get that CPR going if possible, if you have that skill. The recovery position is obviously, again, very important to help the person if they are breathing and you're just waiting for the emergency services there. Getting that person turned onto their side with their head tilted slightly into the sniff position is going to be very important, and that's going to help that person. And obviously, you never want to leave the person alone in any situation. So if you're on your own and you're off the drop zone and you don't have a phone, you still want to wait with that person and hope that people come and find you. And that most likely should always happen. Might take a while, but you need to stay with that person and never leave the person alone. All right, with that, I'm ready to take some questions.
Okay, very good. I think one of the questions I saw coming by mostly is that's what we saw yesterday as well, where people are most concerned about injuries that they cannot see and therefore might be worried about taking the helmet off. Jeff, also, maybe you can reply to that the same way that you did yesterday.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. That's not always happening. First of all, neck injury, spine injury, it's not a visible injury. If you can see actually a broken neck or a spine injury, there is a whole lot more to worry about than only that injury. But skydiving, due to the nature of the sports, we have high impacts, crashes. We always, no matter what, there's always a speed and a big impact on the body. So we will let's say it's neck injury, spine injury, until it's proven you don't have it, we will think you have it. So be very gentle when you move someone, when you move a helmet, when you move a head. That's why we take a grip of the helmet as first thing to try and stabilize the neck. But even a neck injury is not that important if you can't breathe. I mean, treat first what kills first. You need to be able to breathe. And when you're breathing in your helmet, you're rebreathing your own oxygen that you breathe out. So you're only using 17% of oxygen that's in the breathing air. So it makes it a lot more difficult for your body to gain power and to gain energy. So opening up the helmet and even remove it is really helping the victim. That's one thing. The second thing is, as skydivers, we're putting on our rigs, we're putting on our helmets every weekend, 10 times, 15 times, a couple of times, definitely. So we are used to work with this kind of equipment. A paramedic in Belgium doesn't have experience with parachuting equipment. The first time they see a helmet for use for skydiving, like the G3, the G4s, is at the scene of the accident. That's the first time they see this equipment. So they will have to search about how to put it off and how to remove it in a safe manner. And this will take head movement. Even for a trained paramedic, they don't know this equipment. So we're much more capable of removing this equipment in a gentle way than a paramedic is. Exactly the same with the rig. If the accident was really bad and you're like, we're not gonna move him, that's fine. Still open up the helmet, but don't remove the rig because they will cut it and it will be gone. But if there's a possibility to remove the rig, we're better trained and we have the experience to do it a lot more than a paramedic or a doctor who doesn't care about the equipment and it will just cut it anyway because he doesn't know what it is. So that's
yeah.
Giving oxygen is much more important than saving the neck, but it doesn't mean we have to be rough with the neck and move it around. No, stabilize it, move it as gentle as possible, and be very subtle and make sure it's fragile. It's very fragile, but we'll have to go through it and remove it anyhow. It has to be removed before you can go to the hospital.
Yeah, they will remove it anyway. That's a clear conclusion, and the better we can support with that, the more sense it makes, I guess.
Yeah, they will definitely remove it. They have to investigate and give him oxygen when they have all the equipment with them. So they have to remove the helmet, but they never saw a helmet. And removing a G4, G3 is quite tricky. We all know this. Imagine if you never have seen such a helmet, how much more difficult it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fair remark to make. Another question we have is about, due to COVID, we're all wearing buffs or face masks or whatever. That also is affecting our breathing. What is your recommendation on that now? I mean, today, if you would get called up within 5 minutes about because there's a lot of motorcyclists on the road now, they have their helmets on, maybe they also have a buff or a face mask on, what would you do now?
Remove it as fast as possible.
Voila.
Yeah. Yeah, COVID is real. I'm 100%. I'm also 100% for that everybody gets this vaccine as fast as possible, because this will make us be able to jump again quite fast, as fast as possible again. And yes, there is a risk in removing a face mask. I will be wearing one for myself. I'm not in distress. I'm doing a job. So I will keep wearing my mask as much as possible, especially when I'm around strangers. But for the victim, I will remove it immediately, no question about it.
Well, that's clear, I would say. There are some questions about training and removing helmets. We all agreed that the concept of CPR and removing a helmet is not something that we can easily demonstrate online. No. So we definitely would recommend everybody to try it on the drop zone, get somebody who, because in the past years, we already did a few of those trainings, and it's something that you need to get used of. So I would recommend that when we do have some spare time on drop zone, that we would individually retrain that to get some people again acknowledged with the procedure, even though it's not always that easy. I think one of the most important things is we all know how to remove our rigs and our helmets ourselves, and at least that's something that you can look into when you're supporting somebody else. An interesting remark that we had from yesterday was if somebody needs CPR, there is one important tip. If the person is still having his reserve in his rig, then you can remove that by just opening up the reserve pack and pulling out the reserve, so at least this person can easily go on his back if he needs CPR. That was definitely a good, interesting reminder of yesterday. Anything more to add from your side, Jeff?
Yeah, really short. Like removing helmets, like you said, it's something really easy, very fast trainable. If you're in a weather horde or something like that, we all spend hours and hours and hours in the bar at the DZs because we can't jump because there's some clouds or something like that. So a 10 or 15-minute training with 4 people together is already giving a great asset because it's just getting used to doing the handling, opening the helmets. If you're jumping with the same people quite a lot, which is, of course, everybody has its jumping groups. Some like to track, some like to free fly, some like to do other stuff. So mostly you're jumping with the same people in the same time. Take some time in the weather hole to get to know each other's gear. What helmets are we jumping with, and practice on each other, because the biggest possibility is if you're really in a difficult situation and then it's like outlanding with an accident, it's possible that you're probably going to be with people you know. Not every time, but probably you're going to know the people you're with. So get to know their gear. And of course, the mainstream helmets. I already said the G3, the G4s. That's like 80% of the helmets on the market. And then you have 2 or 3 different kind of helmets. So it's quite easily to train with it and get used to do this. Also the block roll, you have to get a demo and see what's important and how to keep the neck and the spine stabilized, because of course this is very important. Like I said, always think a spine and a neck is broken with a skydive accident because of the impact, and it's not broken when it's proven in the hospital that it's not. But until then, it's broken. That's just to keep ourselves safe.
Okay, maybe one last question then, and then I think we should close off due to the time. One last question is somebody's asking, are CPR procedures adapted or different due to COVID?
Yes and no. There is a difference in training and giving mouth-to-mouth breathing because of course, the dangers that's involved with it. But yeah, mouth-to-mouth breathing, and especially in professional healthcare, is something we don't do for a long, long time because of hygienic reasons. We have like a balloon, and on every DZ we have like a emergency bag. And I made sure that in every emergency bag there is this ballooning system for rebreathing, and a mask with a filter in it, so the victim's breathing is not getting into your mouth. So I would definitely recommend to use these tools if you have the possibility. When I will be at the crash sites outside of the drop zone and there's a friend of mine lying and he's in desperate need, I will definitely do the mouth-to-mouth breathing and getting the risk of getting COVID. I mean, I already had COVID. It's not fun, but it's for a young, healthy person, it's quite okay. It's quite okay. Yeah, I don't recommend to get it, and be aware of all the rules that are at this point. They're not for fun. But if someone is really in desperate need, I will give him mouth-to-mouth as well to save his life.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff, and also Casey for supporting us in the English version of this presentation. So great work, guys. I think it's all clear that we do not want to be in that situation, but it's better to be prepared and have some logical paths to follow for that. So that concludes today's day, apart from one small fun detail. And I'm going to give the word to Gerrit.